They were the brightest faces of their generation, adored by millions, showered with fame and fortune before they were old enough to drive. Some became legends, others disappeared overnight, and a few left Hollywood with shocking twists that no one saw coming. Today, we uncover the real stories of 20 child stars who vanished from Hollywood, stories filled with heartbreak, resilience, reinvention, and mystery. Bobby Driscoll, Disney's forgotten boy. At first, Bobby Driscoll looked like he had it all. He wasn't just another child star, he was Disney's very first contracted actor, handpicked by Walt himself. By the age of 12, Bobby had already starred in Treasure Island, won an Academy Juvenile Award, and lent his voice to Disney's timeless Peter Pan. To millions of kids, he was the boy who never grew up, but in real life he did, and when puberty hit, Bobby's once cherubic face changed. Acne scarred his skin, his voice deepened, and Disney quickly lost interest. By 16, the studio that had once treated him like family dropped him without hesitation. The rejection crushed him. Struggling to find work, Bobby turned to drugs. His life spiraled into arrests for burglary, forgery, and narcotics possession. By his 20s, he was penniless, alienated from Hollywood, and living in New York. In 1968, children playing in an abandoned building found his body. He was buried in an unmarked grave, unidentified for nearly 2 years. Only later did police confirm it was Bobby Driscoll, Peter Pan himself, dead at just 31. The boy who once symbolized eternal youth had vanished, leaving behind a story as haunting as it was tragic. Margaret O'Brien, the girl who chose peace. Margaret O'Brien wasn't just another child actress, she was MGM's emotional powerhouse. Audiences adored her as the tearful little sister in Meet Me in St. Louis, acting alongside Judy Garland. She won a juvenile Oscar for her performances and became one of the most reliable child stars of the 1940s. But unlike so many, Margaret refused to cling to fame. As she grew older and Hollywood's obsession with her childhood innocence faded, she made a bold decision to step away. She chose stability over struggle. Instead of chasing fading roles, she turned her focus to school, family, and later theater work. Now, in her late 80s, Margaret lives quietly in California. She still appears at film festivals from time to time, where fans are delighted to see her warm smile and gentle nature, unchanged since the 1940s. Unlike so many of her peers, Margaret O'Brien left Hollywood on her own terms, and for that reason, she never had to suffer its brutal rejection. Her story proves that sometimes the bravest move is to walk away before Hollywood chews you up. Baby Peggy, exploited before kindergarten. Before Shirley Temple or Judy Garland, there was Baby Peggy, Hollywood's very first child superstar. By the age of 6, she had already appeared in more than 150 short films and several feature-length productions, making her one of the most recognizable faces of the silent era. At her peak, she was earning what would be the modern equivalent of over $20 million a year, supporting not just her parents but her entire extended family. She received more than 1 million fan letters, and her likeness was everywhere: dolls, books, clothing. To the world, she was living every child's dream, but behind the scenes, her life was a nightmare. Her father, a former cowboy who became her manager, forced her to work grueling hours with no education, no friends, and no freedom. When she cried from exhaustion, studio crew members would hold an ice cube to her face to stop the tears. Her childhood was stolen long before she understood what it even meant. And then, just as quickly as she rose, it was over. A dispute between her father and producers ended her career overnight. The family's fortune was squandered, leaving them destitute. At 7 years old, Baby Peggy was washed up, working vaudeville stages to keep food on the table. As she grew older, she hated the name Baby Peggy so much that she legally changed it, distancing herself from the exploitation that defined her early life. Later, as Diana Sarah Carey, she rebuilt herself as a writer, historian, and advocate for child actors' rights. She lived to the remarkable age of 101, one of the last living stars of the silent era. Her story is one of Hollywood's cruelest cautionary tales, a girl who was world famous before she could even spell her name, yet robbed of the very childhood that made her famous. Deanna Durbin, Hollywood's greatest vanishing act. Deanna Durbin wasn't just popular, she was a phenomenon. In the late 1930s and 40s, her angelic soprano voice and girl next door image made her one of Universal Studios' most bankable stars. In fact, she's often credited with literally saving the studio from bankruptcy, drawing in millions of fans worldwide. At 21, she was the second highest paid woman in America, commanding enormous contracts and receiving tens of thousands of fan letters every month. But behind her cheerful public image was growing resentment. Deanna felt trapped by the roles she was given, endlessly sweet, wholesome girls that bore no resemblance to who she really was. She longed for more serious parts, but Universal refused. The more famous she became, the more suffocated she felt. And so, at the very peak of her career, she did the unthinkable. At just 27, Deanna Durbin walked away from it all. She moved to France with her husband, raised a family, and refused nearly every interview request for the rest of her life. Her withdrawal was so complete that many younger movie fans have never even heard of her, despite the fact that she was once one of the most famous women in the world. When pressed for an explanation, she gave a rare response: "I never enjoyed making films. I couldn't deal with the unreality of the life I was expected to live." To Deanna, leaving Hollywood wasn't a tragedy, it was liberation. Her deliberate disappearance remains one of Hollywood's greatest mysteries, a reminder that sometimes the most shocking act isn't a scandal, it's silence. Brandon DeWilde, the star who never grew old. In 1953, moviegoers wept when an 11-year-old boy shouted across the screen, "Come back, Shane!" That boy was Brandon DeWilde, and his heartbreaking performance in the Western classic Shane earned him an Academy Award nomination, one of the youngest in history. With his platinum blonde hair and soulful eyes, Brandon became Hollywood's golden boy, destined for a lifetime of success, and for a while he seemed to defy the child star curse. Unlike many who struggled to transition into teenage roles, Brandon found steady work. He starred in films like HUD opposite Paul Newman, appeared on television, and was widely admired for his naturalistic style. Critics called him one of the most promising actors of his generation, but his life ended before it truly began. In 1972, while driving near Denver, Colorado, Brandon lost control of his car and crashed into a truck. He was just 30 years old. His sudden death left audiences and critics stunned. What roles might he have played? What career heights might he have reached? Those questions will never be answered. Brandon DeWilde's story is different from the usual child star tragedy. He didn't fall into addiction or scandal. Instead, fate cut his life short, freezing him forever as the boy who called out for Shane, a talent gone too soon. Shirley Temple, from tap shoes to diplomacy. No child star has ever reached the heights Shirley Temple did. With her curly hair, dimpled smile, and endless energy, she became the face of hope during the Great Depression. By the age of 7, she was earning $50,000 per film, the equivalent of nearly $1 million today. Merchandising deals from dolls to clothing turned her into not just a movie star, but a brand. She wasn't just beloved, she was a symbol of resilience for an entire nation. But fame for children has an expiration date. By her teens, Shirley's box office magic began to fade. The same audience that once adored her as a precocious little girl no longer wanted to see her as a teenager. Studios dropped her, and by 22, she retired from films completely. Yet Shirley Temple's story didn't end with Hollywood. She reinvented herself as Shirley Temple Black, entering politics and public service. She ran for Congress, became a delegate to the United Nations, and later served as U.S. ambassador to Ghana and Czechoslovakia. Her diplomatic career was long and respected, proving that her talents extended far beyond the silver screen. Unlike so many former child stars, Shirley avoided scandal, bitterness, or self-destruction. Instead, she built a second life that was every bit as meaningful as her first. Her story stands as a rare example of a child star who didn't just survive Hollywood, she outgrew it. Scotty Beckett, the little rascal gone wrong. As one of the original little rascals in the Our Gang comedies, Scotty Beckett seemed destined for lifelong fame. With his newsboy cap and mischievous grin, he stole scenes in the 1930s and smoothly transitioned into teenage and young adult roles in the 1940s. He even landed a starring role in the sci-fi TV series Rocky Jones, Space Ranger. For a while, it seemed he had beaten the curse of the child star. But Scotty's personal life spiraled out of control. When his father died during his teens, Scotty turned to alcohol and drugs. Arrests for drunk driving, forgery, and even violent altercations soon followed. Hollywood, once eager to employ him, now avoided him entirely. His career collapsed and his personal demons took over. By the late 1950s, Scotty Beckett was unemployable in the industry that had once celebrated him. His final years were a tragic downward spiral. In 1968, he checked into a nursing home after a severe beating. Just 2 days later, he was found dead from an apparent overdose of barbiturates at only 38 years old. The contrast between the joyful, cap-wearing child who once delighted audiences and the broken man who died in obscurity is one of Hollywood's darkest reminders of fame's fleeting nature. Claude Jarman Jr., the boy who walked away. Claude Jarman Jr. had one of the most spectacular debuts in film history. At just 12, he starred in The Yearling, a story about a boy and his pet deer, delivering a performance so moving, it earned him the Academy Juvenile Award. Critics predicted he would be a fixture in Hollywood for decades, but Claude had different plans. After appearing in a handful of films, including Intruder in the Dust, he realized that acting wasn't the stable career most imagined it to be. Unlike so many of his peers who clung desperately to the fading spotlight, Claude did the unthinkable. He left Hollywood behind while he was still young. He returned to Tennessee, finished high school, and later graduated from Vanderbilt University. After serving in the Navy, Claude found a new place in the film world, not as an actor, but as the executive director of the San Francisco International Film Festival. For 15 years, he shaped cinema from behind the scenes, proving that one could still make an impact without standing in front of the camera. Now in his late 80s, Claude occasionally shares stories of his Hollywood years. But to him, they were just one chapter in a much bigger, richer life, a choice few child stars ever make, and even fewer manage successfully. John Provost, saying goodbye to Lassie. For millions of families in the 1950s, John Provost was Timmy, the boy at the heart of the long-running TV series Lassie. His adventures with the famous collie made him one of the most recognizable faces on television. At the height of its popularity, John received more than 2,000 fan letters a week. But as he grew older, John began to feel trapped. By 14, he was tired of playing the perpetually innocent farm boy. Unlike many child actors, John had the support of his family, who agreed not to renew his contract. His exit was written into the show by having Timmy and his family move to Australia, taking Lassie with them. After Lassie, John's career slowed to a crawl. A few film and TV roles followed, but nothing came close to his earlier fame. Rather than chasing what wasn't there, John pursued education and eventually built a career in real estate development in Northern California. Today, at 74, he looks back at his Hollywood childhood without bitterness. He occasionally attends fan conventions where devoted audiences still remember Timmy. He even wrote a memoir humorously titled Timmy's in the Well, referencing a catchphrase fans remember, even though it was never actually spoken on the show. John Provost's story is one of quiet survival. He enjoyed fame, let it go on his own terms, and built a life far removed from the stage lights, something most child actors never achieve. Jackie Coogan, the kid who changed the law. Discovered by Charlie Chaplin at age 7, Jackie Coogan became a sensation in The Kid. His emotional performance made audiences weep and turned him into Hollywood's first true child superstar. By age 10, he had earned the modern equivalent of $60 million. But when Jackie turned 21, he discovered a devastating truth. Nearly all his money was gone. His mother and stepfather had spent it on jewelry, mansions, and luxury cars. Of the millions he had earned, only about $120,000 remained. His lawsuit against his own family shocked the nation and led to the creation of the Coogan Law, requiring child actors' earnings to be protected in trust. Jackie never regained his childhood fortune, but he gave generations of young performers financial security. Later, Jackie reinvented himself for TV audiences as Uncle Fester in The Addams Family. He never again reached the heights of his youth, but his legacy was larger than any single role. He changed Hollywood law forever. Martin Stevens, the horror prodigy who vanished. Few child actors left as chilling a mark as Martin Stevens. In the early 1960s, he delivered two unforgettable performances, the eerie, mind-controlling David in Village of the Damned and the possessed Miles in The Innocents. His piercing stare and calm, otherworldly delivery terrified audiences and critics alike. For a brief moment, he seemed destined for greatness, and then he vanished. By the mid-1960s, Martin had disappeared from the screen. No scandals, no tragedies, just silence. Fans speculated for decades, had he died young, fallen into obscurity, or chosen a hidden life? The truth eventually surfaced. Martin had deliberately left acting behind. He pursued a quiet life, working in architecture and raising a family in England. He refused interviews for decades, adding to the mystery. Only in later years did he reappear in a handful of documentaries about classic horror, speaking modestly about his brief brush with fame. Martin Stevens represents one of Hollywood's strangest disappearances. Unlike so many who were destroyed by the industry, he simply closed the door and walked away, leaving behind two haunting performances that ensured his legacy lived on long after he stopped acting. Jay North, the menace behind the smile. In the early 1960s, Jay North was one of America's most famous kids. As Dennis in Dennis the Menace, he embodied childhood mischief, his striped shirt and blonde cowlick instantly recognizable to millions. But behind the laughter was a much darker story. On set, Jay's guardians, his aunt and uncle, abused him emotionally, demanding flawless performances and threatening punishment if he fell short. The pressure was unbearable for a child, but he had no escape. By the time he outgrew the role at 12, the damage was done. Typecast as Dennis, Jay struggled to find roles as a teenager. Hollywood moved on, and Jay's career collapsed. He later enlisted in the Navy and worked as a corrections officer, a life far removed from the cameras. In adulthood, Jay broke his silence. He revealed the abuse he endured, advocating for protections for child actors, and exposing the dark underbelly of Hollywood's golden age. Today, he lives quietly, occasionally attending conventions and sharing his story. For Jay North, fame was a curse disguised as a smile. His honesty about his pain made his later legacy more powerful than his time on screen. Gloria Jean, the star who moved on. Gloria Jean was once hailed as the next Deanna Durbin. With her soaring soprano voice and youthful charm, Universal Studios cast her in more than 20 films before she turned 21. Audiences loved her wholesome musicals, and for a time it seemed she would carry the studio's torch into the next decade. But the public's taste shifted. By the late 1940s, lighthearted musicals fell out of fashion. Gloria's career slowed and Universal dropped her contract. Offers from smaller studios trickled in, but none reignited her momentum. Unlike so many child stars, Gloria didn't cling to fading fame. Instead, she embraced a new life. She worked as a hostess, later as an executive receptionist, and focused on raising her son. To her, stability mattered more than the desperate scramble to stay relevant in Hollywood. When asked years later if she regretted leaving stardom, Gloria was refreshingly honest. "When the time came to move on, I moved on." She lived into her 90s, largely forgotten by the public, but completely at peace. Gloria Jean's story is unusual. Not tragic, not sensational, just human. She left fame behind and found happiness elsewhere, something few child stars ever manage. Bonita Granville. From actress to executive, Bonita Granville had a knack for playing bad girls. At just 13, she earned an Academy Award nomination for her chilling role in These Three. Later, she became the face of teenage sleuth Nancy Drew, starring in a beloved series of detective films. But when her childhood stardom faded, Bonita did something extraordinary. She married oil tycoon Jack Rather, and together they transformed themselves into entertainment moguls. Bonita stepped into a new role, not as an actress, but as an executive producer. Her biggest success? Helping to bring Lassie to television. The show became one of the most iconic family series of all time, and Bonita's leadership ensured its longevity. Beyond entertainment, she and her husband built the Rather Corporation, investing in hotels and media ventures. By the time of her death in 1988, Bonita had left acting far behind. But unlike most child stars, her adult life outshone her youthful fame. She wasn't remembered as a washed-up actress. She was remembered as a powerful businesswoman who helped shape American television. Bonita Granville's reinvention proved that Hollywood isn't only about what happens in front of the camera. Kevin Corcoran, Disney's little brother turned director. Disney fans of the 1950s and 60s knew him well. Kevin Corcoran, nicknamed Moochie, was the mischievous kid brother in classics like Old Yeller, Swiss Family Robinson, and The Shaggy Dog. His freckled face and boundless energy made him the ultimate all-American child star. But Kevin was smarter than most. He knew his boyish charm wouldn't last forever. After studying theater arts in college, he stepped behind the camera. Over the next 3 decades, he built a successful career as an assistant director and producer on hit shows like Murder, She Wrote, Quantum Leap, and Baywatch. Unlike many of his peers, Kevin thrived as an adult because he adapted. He never clung to fading fame. He pivoted, and he thrived. Colleagues respected him for his professionalism and his ability to guide child actors with empathy, drawing on his own childhood experiences. When he passed away in 2015, Kevin left behind 2 legacies, as Disney's lovable Moochie and as a respected television producer. His story is rare, a child star who grew up to succeed in Hollywood, not in front of the camera, but behind it. Freddie Bartholomew, the boy torn by custody battles. In the 1930s, Freddie Bartholomew was MGM's answer to Shirley Temple. With his polished British accent and remarkable emotional range, he became the studio's go-to child actor for literary adaptations like David Copperfield and Captain's Courageous. At his peak, Freddie earned an astonishing $2,500 per week during the Great Depression. But behind the elegant persona was heartbreak. Freddie had been raised in poverty in London before his aunt brought him to America. When his career took off, his biological parents suddenly resurfaced, sparking a bitter custody battle over his fortune. The legal fight consumed much of his earnings, leaving him financially drained even as his films soared at the box office. As Freddie grew older, his roles dried up. The refined English schoolboy was no longer what audiences wanted. MGM quietly dropped him when his contract expired at 14. But Freddie didn't collapse. He reinvented himself in advertising, eventually becoming a successful TV executive in New York. When he died in 1992, many of his colleagues in the industry had no idea he had once been one of Hollywood's brightest child stars. Freddie Bartholomew's legacy is bittersweet, a boy whose fame was stolen by family greed, but who later found dignity in an entirely new career. Beverly Washburn, The Middle Path. Beverly Washburn may not have been a household name like Shirley Temple, but in the 1950s, she was one of the busiest child actresses around. With her expressive eyes and ability to cry on cue, directors cast her in dozens of television shows, from The Lone Ranger to Leave It to Beaver. Movie audiences remembered her best for roles in Old Yeller and Shane, but unlike so many of her peers, Beverly's career didn't crash or explode. It simply faded out. She continued to work steadily into her teens, then gradually moved into smaller roles and occasional appearances. By the 1970s, she had largely stepped away from acting, focusing on her personal life. What makes Beverly's story unusual is its lack of extremes. She wasn't destroyed by fame, nor did she reinvent herself into a business mogul or politician. Instead, she represents the middle path, a child actress who worked steadily, transitioned gracefully out of the spotlight, and built a quiet, balanced life afterward. Today, in her 80s, she occasionally attends fan conventions and has written a memoir titled Real Tears, reflecting honestly but without bitterness on her time in Hollywood. Beverly's story reminds us that sometimes the quietest endings are the healthiest ones. June Lockhart, from child star to TV mom, June Lockhart was practically born into show business. The daughter of two actors, she made her screen debut at just 13 in A Christmas Carol, 1938. Throughout her teens, she worked steadily in films, appearing in musicals and dramas, but her true fame came later. Unlike most child actors, June successfully transitioned into adult roles. By the 1950s, she had become America's favorite TV mom, first in Lassie, then in Lost in Space. Generations of viewers grew up watching her as the nurturing, wise mother figure, a far cry from the fragile child roles that defined so many of her peers. What sets June apart is her sheer longevity. Her career has spanned more than 9 decades. Today, at 99 years old, she remains one of the last living links to Hollywood's golden age, still occasionally appearing in interviews and public events. June Lockhart's story isn't one of tragedy or disappearance, it's one of rare survival. She is proof that a child star can grow, adapt, and thrive across multiple eras of entertainment, outlasting nearly all of her contemporaries. Johnny Crawford, from rifleman to musician. Johnny Crawford grew up in America's living rooms as Mark McCain, the devoted son in The Rifleman. For 5 seasons, he starred opposite Chuck Connors, capturing the hearts of viewers with his innocent charm. But Johnny wasn't just an actor, he was also a singer. In the early 1960s, he launched a music career, releasing singles that reached the Billboard Top 40. Songs like Cindy's Birthday proved that Johnny had talent beyond the screen. For a while, he seemed poised to achieve the rarest of Hollywood feats, a smooth transition from child star to adult entertainer. But like so many, Johnny found himself typecast. To audiences, he was always Mark McCain. Acting opportunities dwindled, though his music career provided him steady work for decades. In later life, Johnny found fulfillment by leading a vintage dance orchestra, combining his love of music and history. His later years were marked by struggle with Alzheimer's disease, and he passed away in 2021 at the age of 75. But unlike so many child stars, Johnny Crawford never lost himself. He may not have reached superstar levels as an adult, but he built a life filled with art, music, and meaning. Tommy Rettig, the boy who left Lassie. Before John Provost, there was Tommy Rettig, the original boy to star alongside Lassie. As Jeff in the first 3 seasons of Lassie, Tommy became a household name in the 1950s. With his clean-cut looks and natural chemistry with the collie, audiences adored him. But by 14, Tommy wanted out. He no longer enjoyed acting and asked to be released from his contract, a rare move for a child star. Hollywood didn't forgive easily. Once he left Lassie, meaningful roles dried up, and his career collapsed almost overnight. Adulthood brought struggles, brushes with the law, including arrests for marijuana possession. But Tommy eventually reinvented himself. In the 1970s and 80s, he became a successful computer programmer, working on database software at the dawn of the digital age. For the first time since childhood, he had a career on his own terms. Tommy Rettig died in 1996 at the age of 54, remembered not just as a child actor, but as a man who found peace in technology far from Hollywood. His story stands as one final reminder: sometimes walking away from fame is the bravest choice of all. From Bobby Driscoll's tragic fall to Deanna Durbin's mysterious disappearance, from Shirley Temple's reinvention as a diplomat to Bonita Granville's transformation into a business executive, these stories reveal the complicated truth of child stardom. Fame can make you, it can break you, and sometimes the bravest move is to walk away from it altogether. Some child stars were destroyed by Hollywood, others managed to survive it, and a rare few thrived far beyond it, proving that life after the spotlight can be richer than fame itself. Now we want to hear from you. Which of these stories shocked you the most, and which forgotten star would you like us to uncover next? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. If you enjoyed this journey through Hollywood's golden age, hit the like button to let us know, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story hiding behind the glamour. Because in Hollywood, there's always another secret waiting to be revealed.